Hi, everyone. Welcome to Let's Talk Off the Podium. I have Lisa Bielawa with me. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Tigran. Nice to be here.
Thanks for pronouncing it so perfectly. And before we got on the podcast, you were telling me a story with your Armenian connection.
Yes, I was telling you that I've actually been to Armenia a couple times because I formed a musical friendship, a really wonderful musical friendship with Vache Sharafyan, who is a wonderful composer I met through my colleagues in the Silk Road Project on Yo-Yo Ma's group. I met years ago, and Vache and I really loved each other's music, and so we ended up finding ways to get organizations we worked with to commission each other and find a way to get our music happening in both countries. So I went out there, funded by the Department of State, believe it or not, to go and make some work with Armenian musicians. It's amazing. Really terrific.
That's amazing. And you've been active during this time, which is kind of been tough time for a lot of musicians.
Yes.
Yeah. And can you please tell us what you've been doing, because I think it's a fantastic project.
Oh, thank you so much. I was looking back. It's actually it started pretty much right away. I launched a project called Broadcast from Home, which is the essential elements of it is that there's a website where people can go to Broadcast from Home website, and they contribute their testimonies from wherever they are in the world, what they're experiencing during lockdown, during this whole changing time, of course. And then those testimonies come in on a weekly basis. I go through them and I make sort of selections from those testimonies, and I create melodies, bringing together sometimes one or two, other times 6 or 7 salient testimonies that seem to be expressing the sort of the general feeling of the time. And I make melodies for those, and I write those melodies down. They're little tiny phraselets. I sing them. I record myself singing them. I have a friend of mine, Greg Pernhagen, who's a baritone. He records and sings the men's parts. We throw those up on the website so that people who don't read music can also participate. And then you can upload yourself recording those phrases, and I get those on the other end. I dump them all in. I have a group of musicians. I have different partners every week. I've been partnering with musicians from the Kaufman Music Center, which is the lead partner. They have a group of kids there called Face the Music, high school kids who do an amazing amount of new music. I was working with the Manna School of Music because I had a bunch of students there who suddenly had to be doing things online in the spring. And then this summer, it's been summer festivals that have had to go to an all online format. So these wonderful musicians coming from various summer festivals, those are my house bands, right? Every week. And then I incorporate all those. I write little instrumental phrases that are also sort of flexible little phraselets, so it's not just the left to right. People record those. Everybody sends me everything. I put it all in a big Pro Tools document, and I do most of the composing in Pro Tools, and I crank one of these out every single week. I just finished chapter 14.
That's amazing. That's really fantastic. And you've been known to create these amazing projects, which are, really bringing a community together, because you mentioned something about people who don't read music, they could still participate. Right. And I think that's fantastic, because some of your other projects have also been bringing people together. Why don't you say a little bit about some of your other projects that you've done as well?
Well, this is called Broadcast from Home, which, would make sense as a title all on its own, but it's called Broadcast, which means that it's actually tied to a bunch of other pieces that I've written that are also broadcasts. There's a series called Airfield Broadcasts. So far, there have been 2 of those, and those are, that was Tempelhof Broadcast in Berlin and Crissy Broadcast in San Francisco. Tempelhof Field and Crissy Field are 2 former military airfields that are now public parks. And so the idea was to sort of reinterpret these public spaces that had this sort of military aviation history, whatever, and reinterpret them as a place where the community can come together and sing and play. Yeah. So this was back in 2013. I made these projects. In Berlin, I had around 250 musicians, and in San Francisco, I had about 800. Wow. And these were, in both cases, because it was about public life, and about the communities, about the sort of the musical vitality of the cities themselves. I opened it up to, there were professionals and amateurs and students all together, each having their own role right? I like to say that the only thing that a group leader had to do was to pass the administrative audition. They had to show me that they could organize their troops. And then I would write for them at whatever level they were at. Didn't matter what instruments they played. You know, in Berlin, I had a Alpenhorn orchestra, and in San Francisco, I had a Chinese instrument ensemble. I had to learn how to write for these Chinese instruments. So that was the first set of broadcasts. Those were not my first public space pieces. I had some public space work called Chance Encounter before that was done all over the world. It was done in Seward Park, and that was for Chamber Orchestra The Knights. I wrote that in 2007, and soprano Susan Naruki. And that was a Creative Capital project, you know, and so that kind of thrust me. The Creative Capital Foundation, you know, brings all of its grantees together, and I met all of these sort of social practice visual artists and installation artists, performance artists. And I found this sort of group of people who were in other arts, not necessarily music, who were doing projects that also engage with community in this way through their own arts. And one of them was Cheryl Oring, who's an artist who has a project called I Wish to Say. She's been doing this since 2004. She dresses up in sort of Mad Men era, you know, 60s clothing in public spaces with these colorful manual typewriters. And she offers to type people's postcards to the president or to the next president.
Wow.
So she's been doing this since 2004. I have put together, I've read all 3,000 or so of these. She had another project, because she, like me, she's also done a lot of things in Berlin. So she had another project celebrating the 25th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall. And she typed up people's memories of the wall. So this past fall, when the city of Berlin, the Cultural Council of the City of Berlin organized citywide celebrations of the 30th anniversary of the wall, they commissioned me, and Cheryl, they commissioned me to write a piece that was a sort of a public space choral setting with a few professional horn players, you know, like to kind of give pitches and be out, you know, playing notes in the field, setting these postcards, these little testimonies that she had collected from people 5 years ago. And that piece was fresh in my mind because that was just in November, this past fall. I created for the first time, that piece was called Mauer Broadcast. Mauer is German for wall. So that was another broadcast. And for the first time, I actually created an online learning tool, which is me singing all the parts, and you can go there and learn the parts, and you have a text sheet, and you don't need to be able to read music to participate in that piece. So we had people just from the general public in Berlin. There was a sing-in where you could come and sing, you know, and sing. It was basically like a rehearsal that was just more fun, you know, just for whoever wanted to come, right? And this was, the sing-in was followed then by several performances. And if you were at the sing-in, then you would know what you were doing. But even if you weren't, there was some call and response sections, so people could just kind of join in whatever phrases they felt like they wanted to. So that was Mauer Broadcast. Cheryl and I were getting ready to do a large-scale, very similar project on the postcards to the president called Voters Broadcast. When the pandemic hit. Yeah. But that idea of a learning tool was fresh in my mind. And also a number of other things happened. Of course, I lost all of my work. And, you know, a lot of the musicians I was working with, there wasn't a way for us to continue doing the collaborative projects we were doing, you know, with my students. And there were various organizations I was working with, and also, you know, funders who wanted to, whose work with me, whose partnerships with me were not going to be able to happen. Yeah. So I just sort of brought the whole community together around this idea of making a broadcast like I had been doing, but having it be a broadcast from home, where the end result would not be a big public space performance, but it would still be a large public, you know, a broad participatory project with the same kind of philosophy. The main difference was that I had to learn an entirely different way to make music, of course, because now I'm doing most of my composing in Pro Tools, which is completely new to me, although I'm really much better at it now than I was 3 months ago.
That's amazing. How did this inspiration to do these pieces come about? Because when we think of composition, well, most people, I think, you write something and it's performed in like this set concert hall or a church or a certain venue. Where did this inspiration come to you for initially? Are there other musicians that did this before you?
Sure, I'm sure there are. That's not where the inspiration came from, though. I think the inspiration for me just came from the fact that I've always been a very sort of community-based person. You know, I was the one who organized all the parties in high school. You know, I mean, I like to bring people together and have a beautiful time. It's sort of how I'm wired.
And then you leave.
And then I leave. Yes, you know that. Yes, and then I leave. Yeah, I start the fire and then I leave. I like that. I like instigating community. It's something I've always liked before I joined it to my work. And I guess the corollary to that is that, you know, composing music is a solitary act. I'm good at being alone, actually, as it turns out. But and good thing, because I've been alone for like 4 months now. So however, it is true, though, that like I sometimes feel that in the field, I want to be reaching a broader and more diverse sort of group of people. I love people. I'm inspired by people. So I would say, yes, there are people who've done things like Christo. We just lost Christo recently. There are people, mostly in other arts, who have succeeded at bringing together community in a meaningful way around their work. But it wasn't their example that was my inspiration. It was actually the people that was my inspiration. It's my sort of hunger to be in that, to be facilitating and creating that kind of, that's what makes me tick.
Yeah.
Always. It's been that way.
Yeah.
It's always been that way. Yeah.
And you enjoy the urban life because
I love it. Yeah.
Because, you know, when I ask people, I'm like, well, what do you do to kind of restart your mind or something? That they'll say, oh, I like to go to the countryside or something, go out and do woods camping, but you have a different approach. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I like to go out into the city. It's something I've been really missing. I finally did it on Sunday. I walked like 6 miles in New York just to see what's around, see what's still open, see what's happening.
Yeah.
But I like to be, I don't need company necessarily. I just like to be I'd like to feel the energy of human life. You know, if I don't get that, and it's been hard for me, you know, I mean, I will say that for the broadcast from home in particular, there's been a certain aspect of it that's been replacement therapy for me. But I know that it's not just that for me. It's been that for the participants too. I've had more than 300 participants. You know, this has been replacement therapy for a lot of us, me included.
Yeah.
You know, and it makes it possible for me to feel that thrum of, you know, sort of human energy, even though I'm here in one room.
Yeah. Well, and another thing that I remember reading about I think maybe it was another interview you had done, is that you said that you're not necessarily the person to sing your own music.
That's true.
Something along those lines. I don't know if that's the exact quote. So you compose something that you want someone else to do, or something that you maybe don't feel comfortable doing yourself, so you want someone else to?
No, it's not that I don't feel comfortable doing it myself. I mean, I'm a good singer. I can sing stuff. Like last night I was working and it was like too late for me to like reach out to any of my singer friends. And I was like, oh man, I need this line. Yeah. So I just, turned off the air conditioner and sang it, dumped it in the file. No, I mean, it goes back to the answer to your previous question, I think, you know, which is that if I'm inspired by people, then how inspiring, I mean, I can look at myself in the mirror and, you know, be inspired by that. But we have names for people like that. I mean, I just don't, you know, I don't find I like my instrument, you know, my voice. I enjoy singing. But that's a different avenue for me.
Yeah.
I'm happy to be a soloist in my own work if people want me to do that. But the energy of the creative process doesn't come from here. It comes from the interaction with others. And I always find a way, even if I've been asked to write for myself, I always find a way to take the focus off of that. Okay. And to have the collaborator, at least for me, not feel like me, but feel like the text, or it's the other performer or performers that I'm working with. I think there's also an element of fantasy. Like there's all kinds of people whose voices I love, and they can do all kinds of things I can't do. And I know it's the vice versa. It's true, but it's a chance for me to have like 16 heads, right? Writing for other people's voices is a sort of a, you know, it's kind of a macro singing, right? It's like me singing through. That's kind of amazing.
Yeah.
I can't be Greg. He's a gorgeous baritone. I'd love to sound like that. I can't. So I get to write for it.
Yeah. Well, changing gears a little bit, I want to know what you listen to other than, you might say some classical composers or jazz or others. I don't even know if you want to categorize them in certain genres, but any artist, rock or pop or anything that you listen to that most people might be like, wow, I really couldn't believe she listens to that.
Yeah. You've asked a really good question. These chapters take me 50 hours a week to create, and I've been doing it for 14 weeks since the lockdown. So what I need most is silence. And I'm absolutely guilty of being somebody who does not really engage at the moment. When I'm not working, I need silence.
Wow.
I don't use music the way a lot of people use music who are listeners primarily. At other times in my life, or I'm sure again, it's in cycles. I do large scale works generally. That's where my sort of skills and my proclivities are happiest. And so it goes in cycles. I'll go through like months and months like this where I'm just immersed, and then I'll step back from it and I won't compose at all, and then I'll listen. And it can come from like just my piano. Sometimes I'll just play through Domenico Scarlatti. I mean, that's like my thing lately. That's awesome. I love, that's amazing music. My mother is an early music performance practice scholar. So I sang in Pomerium for years. I've sung a lot of Renaissance and early music, and I love that. I love that music. But then my father was a composer, and of course there's all kinds of new music that I love. And when I was in high school, I was really into ska, because that's what we did. That was what my friends and I did. We went out dancing and listened to a lot of ska. Still love it. I love hip hop. Okay. I love Earth, Wind and Fire. I cut my teeth on that stuff. That's great writing, great singing. I love that band.
Wow.
I don't know.
Well, along the same lines, I some hobbies, some passions that you have. Anything unusual that you think most people don't know about you that you're willing to share?
I'm willing to share pretty much anything, but I can't really. I mean, my friends pretty much tease me for just like basically working most of the time. I'm trying to think. Well, hobbies. I mean, I guess you could call reading a hobby, except that it's so much a part of my work too. But I was a literature major in college.
Of course, and I was going to ask about that.
Yeah.
From Yale literature to being a composer. How did that transition happen?
Well, it was a sandwich. I mean, I was a composer. I started composing when I was like 6 or 7 years old, because my family was, played violin when I was a kid. Studied piano with my mother, and sang in the church choir. And so I think in some ways there are a couple answers, and they're all true. In some ways I had a really rigorous music education when I was growing up. And so when I was in college, why not do something else? Because it was clear as day, if not to me, which I think it was, but certainly to everybody else, that I was just going to go into music anyway. Why not do something else while I was there? I was at Yale. I had this amazing literature department, and I had always loved reading, and I'd always loved literature. And so there's that. There's also the fact that it was a more welcoming environment at that time. This was the late 80s, and there weren't really any women teaching. There weren't a lot of women in the classes, and because music, sort of high-level music theory and composition, it just wasn't a place where I felt like there was a lot of the same kind of welcoming energy that I felt in the literature department, where I could study with these terrifying, super smart women, and have women classmates and sort of cut my teeth on this very, very rigorous, intellectual program that really helped me think, and eventually really, I think, influenced my work a lot, that I did that major. I think it made a huge difference.
And you've also done some opera work, right? You've
an
opera, and but you didn't write the libretto to it.
No. Well, and I also this goes back to your question about whether or not I write for myself to sing. I mean, the collaboration with the librettist is one of the most exciting things. Yeah. And also, remember, I studied literary theory. Okay. I didn't study creative writing.
Interesting. Okay.
I keep a diary. I write every day. In fact, I just filled like 70 books or something. And I'm a good researcher. I'm a very good researcher. I appreciate good writing very, very much. But I really love sparring with terrific writers.
Yeah. And that's great. The collaboration aspect is important, and there's so much to learn. I mean, maybe some of your experiences, but there's so much to it, because sometimes you have to, you can push a little bit and say, no, I want things this way, but then you have to be flexible and be open to the other person saying, well, I want it this way. So any interesting stories, any places where you had to push and pull a little bit, something that you're willing to share with us?
You know, Vireo, my opera that was created as an episodic television show, Vireo, the spiritual biography of a witch's accuser, which is, you know, getting a lot of play now because, of course, people can't, you know, it's a great way to see opera at the moment. And you can still stream it on KCET. It's still streaming for free on KCET.
I did too. I did that, yeah.
Yeah, it's, you know, and that was a project that took me 3 years to get all that. But I had 2 collaborators there, Arakelyan, the librettist, who took all of my research, by the way, that I had done for my senior essay in the literature major. That was what my senior essay was about, was these young girls, right? The protagonist of Vireo is this young woman who's a sort of a visionary, or is she a witch, or is she a witch namer, you know, and she travels through multiple centuries at once. And that has everything to do with the fact that I was studying a broad range, my research encompassed a broad range of historical documents. So I tend to be a really good researcher, and I'll give my research to my collaborator. And in this case, then I had Eric N., who's the wonderful playwright, who was the librettist, and then I had Charlie Oddie, who was the director, and he brought in. He's worked both in contemporary opera but also in film, so he was able to kind of, you know, to straddle these worlds. And people asked us that a lot, like, what are conversations like between all of you, and, you know, how is it, you know, and the thing that I feel most blessed about, I think, in general with my collaborations, the ones that work really beautifully, is how shockingly little actual, like, sort of talking or negotiating there is. With Eric, it was at an extreme. I sent him the research. A couple months later, there was a libretto in my inbox. Sometimes I say to him, this doesn't work. It's got to be shorter. He sent it back. It was shorter.
Yeah.
You know, he'd say, are you sure about that section? I'd be like, nah, it's out. I mean, you would not believe how little conversation there was with these guys, the 3 of us. It was so smooth. We trusted each other so much.
Wow.
The subject matter was gnarly and, you know, and deep and multi-layered. But the truth of the matter is our conversations between us were not some sort of, you know, effete kind of like, we were getting the work made. You know, we were getting the work made. The interesting idea, the percolation of ideas is implicit. Like my friend Clara Solomon, who has been the archivist for Broadcast from Home. She's a wonderful writer as well. And she and I are embarking on an opera project together now. She's my new librettist for this opera that I'm working on now. And, you know, we often have a conversation where we're starting to discuss something that we don't really need to discuss. So we just say, well, it's implicit. We just skip that. We know it about each other already. We know we agree about it. If we don't, it'll become clear later and we'll agree then. You know, I mean, it's very natural. And I think that's only possible when you have great confidence in your collaborators and also in yourself, in your own, you know, just the sort of, it's unbelievable how much true, you know, if you're really centered in the work, how many problems just go away. You know, then you can be there for the constituents, for the people, like with Broadcast from Home, that can be there, can do this sort of, like I've been calling this project a kind of an act of radical listening, you know, listening to all of these people's stories and their voices. And, you know, it's important for me not to be all, you know, to be positioning myself there. I'm taking it in and I'm consolidating and I'm hearing and I'm if I'm going to really sense accurately what is happening in our world here and what energies there are and pull them together and be able to offer something that represents our shared experience at this time, then I have to do what I can to make sure that my self, you know, that all my selfness doesn't get in the way, you know. It's never 100%, but I strive for that.
Yeah. And it could be overwhelming to listen to all these stories. I'm assuming
it is.
You know, you hear stories that might be really tough to even listen to, and then you might listen to, I don't know if you're getting too many of those, but you might listen to something that's kind of a funny incident or something.
Yeah.
So how do how much time do you spend with that? And then,
A lot.
you walk away and you're like, okay, I got to stay away from this for about half an hour before I go back to it. What's your routine? Is there a routine?
Yeah, there's a routine, because I mean, the schedule is actually pretty punishing. So, the schedule is, I mean, like I mentioned, is 50 hours a week. I have deliverables on a variety of days because I've got a lot of people on the team.
Yeah.
So we're talking today. This is a Wednesday. By Wednesday at 10 in the morning, I have to have the mix, meaning not the mix, the edit. I don't do the mixing. I don't do the mixing and mastering, but I do the editing, because the editing is the composing.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So I have to have the finished edit of the new chapter that's going to get published tomorrow. That has to be done and sent over to the engineer by 10 o'clock on Wednesday mornings, right? By 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, which means after I, get off this interview with you, I have to go have some lunch, and then I got to dive in, because I actually have to read all the testimonies from this week, select the text, come up with the phrases, record them, send the tenor bass sheet to my friend Greg so he can record them, so that they are all recorded and scored in Sibelius by 10 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Wow.
And then those get put up by my team. Christina Jensen and her team are they run all of the website and everything. And so her team, my web guy, puts it all together in these little YouTube videos so that people can learn, without having to read the music, but they can see it there if they want. That all gets published at the same time as the new chapter gets published. So tomorrow you'll see chapter 14 completed go up on the website, and you'll see the phrases for chapter 15 go up as well, which I haven't written yet, but those will go up tomorrow. So then I have the instrumental parts that I write after the vocal parts. And those are not parts, those are little phraselets. Like I said, I don't necessarily know how they're going to fit together. But by Wednesday, which is yesterday, today's Wednesday, by today, I know what the instruments are. And by the end of the day, Friday, those parts are written. So, yeah.
That's tough.
Yes.
It's a rigorous schedule.
Yeah.
Again, moving to another topic a little bit, but something I've been asking, I've done this over 120 guests, and
wow, that's amazing.
I've asked this question maybe about 90% of the guests: a life-changing moment, both a personal and a professional. If there are, something that comes to mind that you want to share, and I know some of the personal ones. For example, I had David Harrington of Kronos Quartet. He told a very personal story, and there have been people who've said very personal stuff. Something that you feel comfortable sharing with us, a personal or a professional life-changing moment.
This pandemic is one. This is one.
Yeah.
Personal and artistic.
Yeah.
For sure. This process has been more intimate. I've felt more connected than ever before through this process. And I don't know if I would have really survived the last 4 months without it. I mean, I'm in Manhattan. I'm a block away from the hospital. We were the epicenter here, and I was a block away from where it was all happening. I live by myself. I have issues of touch starvation. I haven't had a hug for 4 months.
Wow.
So I don't think I'm going to come out of this the same as an artist or as a person. I mean, I know I'm not, and I'm not special that way. There's a lot of people for whom that's true. So if you had asked me that question 2 years from now, I think that would still be my answer. I'm guessing, right?
Wow. Well, hopefully we could do this one day in person, face to face.
Yeah.
When I started this podcast, it was mostly virtual, and I did phone interviews. And then about a year ago, I was like, well, you know what? I really want to sit across someone and talk to them. So I started doing that. Then this happened. Everything happened around the world. So I went back to virtual podcasts. But with all the amazing things that you've done in your career, and I'm sure there have been really tough moments, what advice would you give to young musicians who are struggling to put a career together, who are struggling in the current situation? Based on all your experiences, what advice would you give them?
Well, I mean, first of all, my heart goes out to them, because what a time to be entering the field. I mean, it's a hard time for all of us, but what a time, to be trying to make sense, starting to navigate a professional life. I really just, my first piece of advice is, reach out for support. It's not supposed to be this hard. That's what I would tell them. You're not crazy. It's not supposed to be this hard.
No.
The second piece of advice I'd give them is, there's a tendency among young artists to sort of reach up, like the people you admire. I want to work with, whatever. I want to work with, David Harrington. I've worked with, of course, for years. And Kronos Quartet. But if you're 25, if you're 21, there's some people around you who are the Kronos Quartet of 40 years from now.
Yeah.
So the other piece of advice I'd give you is just look around, stay with the energy of your generation. Make sure that of all generations, but make sure that you don't lean up so much diagonally. There's nothing wrong with mentorship. And I have a lot of wonderful younger colleagues and, students and mentees, but the truly transformative relationships are going to be the ones with people who come up with you and develop their craft alongside you.
Yeah.
That would be my other piece of advice.
That's really great, because you're right about that. You sometimes see young artists who are really and it's not their fault. They really are trying to make a career, so they're trying to get to that
they reach up. And
you're right. There's so many really talented young artists who don't have that name. They're not, obviously they're not the Kronos Quartet 40 years to be the Kronos Quartet, but you can build something to get to that next place in life.
And sparking each other's innovation, that's going to happen. It's, right there, on the same level as you. That's where these, you go out for beers with or these days you don't, have Zoom cocktails, whatever you do, like with your, that's where these ideas start, where you start building the new world together, At a certain point, the rest of us, I'm 51, I'm not going to be here forever, hopefully I'll be here for a long, long time. But the truth is that, that's the nature of human life. If you want to make a life, I always said I wanted to have a long career rather than an early one. I've always wanted that.
Wow. Going back, a couple more questions for you. Going back, I have to ask about the Philip Glass Ensemble.
Yeah, sure.
I know you probably get this question every time you have a.
I do. It's okay. He's the most famous composer around. And he's someone I've been working with since, 28 years ago. So
yeah. So some of your experiences. I don't want to ask a particular question. Just something that comes to mind when you think about your time with the ensemble. I have the privilege of having had an incredibly just sort of private and personal experience of this work. Mostly, it's a friendship that has sustained itself on just hundreds and thousands of hours probably of just sitting on stage during sound check and just talking about stuff or whatever, it's my family, it's been, I was so young when I got the job. So young. I was right out of school. And it just articulates my entire adult experience, these guys. I've been all over the world with them many times over. And I don't know. It represents a familial bond to me. All of those relationships with Philip especially, but all those guys too. The rest of the whole group, Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that. I know you get that a lot, and I've had guests where they've collaborated with some great artists who are iconic figures in music, and I don't like to ask very specific questions, so that's why it's kind of a general question. Anything else you want to add before we end today to your colleagues, friends, artists, something before we end?
I don't think so. This is a great, sort of forum you are providing, and you're wonderful. It's great that you're doing this, and also that you're focusing on younger people and keeping the field, keeping people looking forward.
Yeah.
We need to find ways to make work together now that are fulfilling and meaningful, and we also need to find ways to encourage each other to look ahead. And figure out what it's going to be. I guess my only other thing I would say is, I don't think I'm the only one who's going to come out of this changed. And I think it's important for us all to know and to remember and to lean towards the possibility of a world, of making music together that maybe may feel entirely new. And that's going to be hard and also amazing, probably. Depends. I mean, who knows? But I think we should not be scared to consider that it might not just be about waiting for things to open up again and things to go back to the way they were. That might not be how it feels. That might not be what we want exactly. So
yeah, that's great advice, because sometimes we get so used to things the way we have things. The performance has to be in a concert hall. We have to be around, and it's great. Right. Of course, those are things that we've gotten used to, and there's nothing like a live performance. I love being in a live performance. I've been telling my guests, one of the main things I love about a live performance is being able to focus on things that I want to focus on. I could look at the bass player for 15 minutes if I want to. I could look at the the second violin or whatever I want to look at, or just close my eyes and enjoy the experience. So I love live performances. I hope we could have that, because I'm so used to it. But that doesn't mean that we can't grow the field and find other ways to.
Yeah, and we don't know. I mean, there's a lot of place for innovation there.
Yeah.
It used to be that levels of success in our field were a packed house and playing all over the world. Those can't be the measures of the success now. But what are the measures of our success of our work now? What does that mean? If you have a successful artistic experience now, what does that mean? If you have a successful project, what does that mean now? How do we define that, and how do we feel that, and how do we let that inform our understanding of what our sense of purpose needs to be?
Amazing.
Tough questions. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for
you're welcome.
being my guest. I really hope I see you in person, and also maybe we could have one of these podcasts in person.
I would love that. Thanks so much, Tigran.
Have a beautiful day.
Thanks for listening to Let's Talk Off the Podium. If you enjoyed this episode, please comment, share, and subscribe. Stay tuned for the next episode.